Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku was trained by Master Roshi, Dragon Ball. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The air was a thick, humid cocktail of brine and rust. It coated the back of Izuku Midoriya's throat, a gritty film that each ragged gasp only made worse. 14 days. For 14 excruciating days he had waged war against this monument to societal neglect, this graveyard of forgotten things called Dagoba Municipal Beach Park. And for 14 days, the beach was winning. His world had shrunk to the burn of lactic acid in his muscles, the symphony of his own frantic heartbeat in his ears, and the singular, soul-crushing weight of the rusted-out refrigerator strapped to his back. "Gotta keep going," he wheezed, his sneakers sinking into the loose sand that was peppered with broken glass and corroded metal. Each step was a negotiation with gravity, a desperate plea to his own screaming nerve endings. The American Dream Plan, All Might had called it. The name was so bright, so optimistic, so All Might. It was a 10-month roadmap to forging his frail, quirkless body into a worthy vessel for the sacred torch of One for All. On paper, it was a list of exercises, sleep schedules, and dietary plans. In practice, it was a special kind of hell designed by a god. Izuku's own plan, the one he meticulously crafted after All Might's departure, involved dividing the beach into a grid and clearing it systematically. It was logical. It was efficient. And it was utterly, completely, demoralizingly overwhelming. The sheer scale of the task was a physical weight, heavier even than the vintage appliance digging into his spine. He had started with such fervor, a fire in his belly stoked by the promise of his dream. He was going to be a hero. He was going to be All Might's successor. He would make this beach shine, a testament to his effort. Now, 2 weeks in, the fire was a flickering ember, threatened by a tidal wave of exhaustion and self-doubt. His body, unaccustomed to such rigorous abuse, felt like a collection of bruised fruit held together by sheer stubbornness. His progress on the beach was barely a smudge against the colossal canvas of trash. A few dozen tires here, a pile of sorted scrap there. It was a single drop of water in a polluted ocean. He could feel All Might's disappointment before it even happened. He could picture the hero's skeletal form, a sad smile on his face. "I might have misjudged your spirit, my boy." "No!" The word escaped his lips as a choked sob. He gritted his teeth, the taste of salt and iron flooding his mouth. He would not fail. He could not. He was the one All Might had chosen. He had to be worthy. He channeled that desperation into one more heaving step. His foot snagged on a half-buried car axle. His balance, already a precarious concept, vanished entirely. The world tilted sideways in a nauseating lurch. He let out a pathetic yelp as he tumbled, the refrigerator peeling off his back and landing with a deafening crunch beside him. The impact sent a shockwave through the sand, rattling a nearby mountain of discarded microwaves. Izuku lay there, sprawled in the filth, his face pressed against the cool, damp sand. The world spun. His lungs felt like they were full of broken glass. Every muscle fiber was a tiny, protesting scream. Tears of frustration and pain pricked at the corners of his eyes, mixing with the sweat and grime on his cheeks. He had failed. He couldn't even move a single refrigerator across one quadrant of his own grid. How could he possibly hope to carry the weight of the world's hope? He stayed there for a long time, listening to the mocking caw of gulls and the gentle lapping of polluted waves against the shore. The sun beat down, turning the metal trash heaps into ovens that radiated a stifling heat. Slowly, pathetically, he pushed himself onto his elbows. The world swam back into focus. And that's when he saw it. Through the shimmering heat haze, nestled in a small cove at the far end of the beach, was something impossible. It was a patch of clean, pristine sand. Not just less trashed, but clean. The sand was a pale, healthy gold, not the grayish-brown of the rest of the beach. And sitting right in the middle of this oasis, as if it had been dropped there from another world, was a small, pink, dome-shaped house with the word Cane painted in big, friendly letters above the door. A single palm tree swayed gently beside it, its fronds a vibrant green that seemed to mock the decay surrounding it. Izuku blinked. Was he hallucinating? A heat-stroke-induced mirage? It had to be. No one in their right mind would live here. This place was a designated dump, a forgotten corner of the city, yet the house looked solid. Real. Smoke, or maybe steam, curled lazily from a small chimney. Curiosity, a force almost as powerful as his own hero worship, began to override his exhaustion. He got to his feet, his body groaning in protest, and began to trudge towards the bizarre little house. The closer he got, the more surreal it seemed. The line between the trash-strewn hellscape and the clean patch of sand was stark, as if someone had drawn a line and commanded the filth not to cross. As he neared the edge of the clean sand, a voice cut through the air, startling him so badly he nearly fell over again. My! That was quite the display of youthful flailing. The voice was old, slightly raspy, but held a strange, mischievous energy. Izuku whipped his head around, searching for the source. Sitting in a simple lawn chair under the shade of the palm tree was an old man. He was ancient, his skin tanned and wrinkled like old leather. A long, snow-white beard and mustache combination covered the lower half of his face, and his bald head was covered by a pair of dark, round sunglasses. He wore a loud, orange Hawaiian shirt, a pair of green shorts, and on his back was a large, purple turtle shell. Izuku's brain, the analytical engine that was always running, immediately tried to process the information. Elderly man. Obvious mutation-type quirk for the shell. Or perhaps a support item? The strength required to carry that shell constantly would be significant. Is he a retired pro-hero? A hermit? Why is he living on a trash heap? The old man took a long sip from a tall glass of what looked like iced tea before speaking again, his voice laced with amusement. You move like a newborn giraffe, boy. All limbs and no coordination. You put your back into it, sure, but you forgot to bring your legs, your core, or your brain along for the ride. Izuku felt a hot flush of embarrassment creep up his neck. He was being critiqued by a strange, turtle-themed senior citizen. I am following a plan, he stammered, defending himself out of instinct. It's a very advanced workout regimen designed to maximize muscle growth and he trailed off, realizing how foolish he sounded. The old man chuckled, a dry, rattling sound. A plan, eh? A plan to throw your body at a problem until one of them breaks? Sounds more like a recipe for a slipped disc than for success. I've been watching you for a few days now. You run around like a headless chicken, burning 10 times the energy you need to. Your breathing is shallow, your footing is a mess, and you have the balance of a drunkard on a unicycle. Every word was a perfectly aimed dart, puncturing Izuku's fragile pride. The worst part was, he knew the old man was right. He did feel like he was just flailing, just throwing his raw effort at an immovable object. It's from All Might. Izuku blurted out, the name a desperate shield. The #1 hero gave me this plan. The old man's eyebrows, bushy and white, rose above the rim of his sunglasses. All Might? The big fella with the ridiculous hair? Ah, that explains it. All power, no finesse. His methods are like using a sledgehammer to crack a nut. Effective, I suppose, if you don't mind obliterating the nut in the process. Izuku's jaw dropped. To hear someone talk about All Might with such casual, almost dismissive criticism was blasphemy. He's the greatest hero of all time. He may be, the old man said, shrugging. But that doesn't make him the greatest teacher. A strong man doesn't always know how to teach others to be strong. He only knows what worked for him. He gestured a frail, bony hand towards Izuku. And you, my boy, are not him. Trying to copy his path will only lead you to ruin. Izuku deflated. The old man's words cut deep because they resonated with the secret, terrified whispers in his own heart. He wasn't All Might. He was just Izuku Midoriya, a quirkless nobody trying to fill shoes the size of craters. Seeing the boy's spirit crumble, the old man's expression softened slightly. A mischievous glint returned to his unseen eyes. All right, how about this? A little challenge to settle it. He pointed a gnarled finger towards a massive, algae-covered boulder half buried in the sand near the water's edge. It was the size of a small car, easily several tons. I see that look in your eye. You're full of fighting spirit, even if it's misguided. You think your way is the right way. He stood up from his chair, his movements surprisingly fluid. If you can move that boulder, even an inch, I don't care. I'll shove my trap, give you a cold drink, and never bother you again. You can continue your American dream plan in peace. He paused, a grin splitting his beard. But if you can't, you'll listen to me. You'll train my way. What do you say, boy? Izuku stared at the boulder. It was an impossible task. He knew that. But the challenge had reignited that tiny, stubborn ember inside him. He was being underestimated. This old man saw him as weak, as just a flailing kid. He would show him. He would show him the spirit that All Might saw in him. You're on! Izuku declared, his voice filled with a renewed, if foolish, determination. He marched over to the boulder, the old man trailing behind him with an amused air. The rock was even bigger up close. Its surface was slick with sea slime and barnacles, offering poor purchase. It looked less like a rock and more like a permanent piece of the geology, fused to the very bedrock of the planet. Okay, Midoriya, think, he told himself, his analytical mind taking over. Brute force won't work. Leverage. Physics. He found a spot where the base of the boulder was slightly undercut by the tide. He dug his feet into the sand, trying to create a solid anchor. He crouched low, getting his center of gravity beneath the rock's own. He placed his hands on a rough, flatter section, ignoring the sharp edges of the barnacles digging into his palms. This is for All Might, he thought, a mantra to fuel him. This is to prove I'm worthy. He took a deep breath, held it, and pushed. He pushed with every ounce of strength he possessed. He pushed with the desperation of a drowning man reaching for the surface. Veins stood out on his neck and forehead. A low, guttural grunt tore from his throat. His legs trembled violently, the sand shifting and giving way beneath his feet. His arms felt like they were being torn from their sockets. The boulder, in response to his Herculean effort, did absolutely nothing. It didn't shift. It didn't tremble. It didn't even seem to register his existence. He tried again, shifting his position, trying a different angle. He tried to get his shoulder under it. He tried to dig away the sand from its base. Nothing. It was like trying to push the beach itself. After 5 minutes of fruitless, agonizing struggle, he collapsed backwards, panting, his vision swimming with black spots. He had failed. Utterly and spectacularly. A dry chuckle came from behind him. Had enough, Sonny? Izuku didn't answer. He just lay there, defeated, the shame a cold, heavy blanket. The old man walked up to the boulder, patting its slimy side almost affectionately. It's a good rock. Been here a long time. He placed one hand palm flat against its immense surface. He wasn't braced. His feet were planted casually in the sand. He took a quiet breath, a gentle inhale that was barely audible over the waves, and then he pushed. There was no grunt, no strain, no show of effort at all. It was as if he were closing a car door. The massive boulder, the multi-ton behemoth that had mocked Izuku's very existence, slid forward with a deep, groaning scrape. It moved a full foot, then 2, before settling into the wet sand with a soft thump. Izuku's brain short-circuited. He sat bolt upright, his exhaustion completely forgotten, replaced by a profound, earth-shattering sense of awe and disbelief. He stared at the boulder in its new position, then at the old man, who was now casually dusting off his hand. Shoe quirk, Izuku stammered, his mind racing through possibilities. Is it a strength enhancement quirk? Or telekinesis? But there was no energy signature, no visual cue, and for someone of his age to maintain a quirk with that level of output, the physical toll should be immense, unless it's a highly efficient metabolic type. But even then, the old man waved a dismissive hand. Quirk? Heh. Don't be silly, boy. That was just a little push. It's all in the technique. Technique? Izuku's mind reeled. No technique could account for that. It defied the laws of physics. That wasn't strength. That was something else. Something fundamental and terrifyingly powerful. The old man turned to face him, the setting sun glinting off his sunglasses. So, we have a deal. You lost. Are you a boy of your word? Izuku scrambled to his feet. He looked at his own trembling, scraped hands, then at the impossibly strong old man, and finally at the displaced boulder. All his plans, All his meticulous grids and schedules felt like a child's crayon drawing next to a master's oil painting. The path All Might had set for him was one of brute force. This old man was offering a path of something more. Something wiser. He took a deep breath, straightened his back, and bowed a full, formal 90 degrees. "Please," he said, his voice ringing with sincerity. "Please teach me. I want to learn your way. My name is Izuku Midoriya." The old man stroked his long white beard, a slow, thoughtful gesture. A genuine, warm smile finally broke through his mischievous facade. "The name's Roshi. Master Roshi to you, and I'm a hermit of the Turtle School of Martial Arts." He nodded. "Very well, Izuku Midoriya. I accept you as my student." A sudden, booming laugh echoed across the beach, so loud it startled the gulls into a panicked flurry. "Ha ha! Young Midoriya! I see you've made a friend!" Izuku and Roshi turned to see All Might, in his magnificent, muscle-bound form, standing at the edge of the dunes. He must have just arrived to check on Izuku's progress. He strode towards them, his smile as bright as the sun, though his eyes were sharp and analytical as they fell upon Master Roshi. "And who might this be?" All Might asked, his voice friendly but with an undercurrent of caution. He was the picture of a protective mentor. "This is Master Roshi, All Might," Izuku said excitedly. He's going to help me with my training." Roshi gave a polite, if slightly lazy, bow. "A pleasure to meet you, Mr. All Might. Just an old man enjoying his retirement. I saw the boy here struggling and thought I might offer some pointers on proper form. He's got spirit, I'll give him that, but his foundations are made of sand." All Might's smile tightened a fraction. He was clearly wary of this strange, turtle-shelled character influencing his chosen successor. "I appreciate the sentiment, citizen, but his training is highly specialized. It is a plan I designed myself to prepare him for a difficult road ahead." "Ah yes, the sledgehammer approach," Roshi said with a chuckle, completely unintimidated by the pillar of muscle standing before him. "A fine way to build raw power, I'm sure. But what good is a cannon if it shatters its own carriage after one shot? The strongest tree needs the deepest roots. The boy needs to learn control, balance, and discipline before you fill him with lightning, otherwise—" He poked a thumb back towards the trash section of the beach. "You get that? A lot of effort for very little result, and a body on the verge of breaking." All Might fell silent. He couldn't argue with the logic. He had been so focused on getting Izuku's body to a baseline of strength that he had overlooked the finer points. The American Dream Plan was, in essence, a crash course. A blunt instrument. He looked at Izuku, tired, scraped, but with a new light of hope in his eyes, and then at Roshi. The old man was eccentric, to be sure, but his words held the weight of experience. Perhaps this was a necessary supplement. "Very well," All Might said finally, his booming voice softer now. "Discipline and form are never a bad thing. I trust your judgment, young Midoriya. But I will be checking in frequently." It was both a concession and a warning. Roshi simply nodded. "As you should. He is your boy, after all." As All Might prepared to leave, offering Izuku a final word of encouragement, and a thumbs up, Roshi placed a hand on his new student's shoulder. Izuku flinched, expecting a grip of iron, but the touch was surprisingly light, yet firm and steadying. "Now listen close, Izuku Midoriya," Roshi said, his voice losing its mischievous edge and taking on a serious, commanding tone that demanded attention. "Forget everything you think you know about getting stronger. Forget about the grand goal. Forget about becoming a vessel. All of that is the roof of a house you haven't even built yet." He pointed to Izuku's chest. "Your first task is to build the foundation. We are not here to make you powerful. We are here to teach your body how to be, how to move, how to breathe, how to exist in harmony with your own energy instead of fighting against it." Izuku looked up at him, mesmerized. This was a philosophy of strength he had never encountered, a world away from the explosive smashes he idolized. It was quieter, deeper. Master Roshi turned and began to walk back toward his pink house, the setting sun silhouetting his strange form. "The training begins at sunrise," he called back over his shoulder, not bothering to see if Izuku was following. Don't be late. Izuku stood frozen on the sand, a crossroads in his own life. Behind him lay the wreckage of his old methods and the colossal figure of his idol, All Might. Before him was a bizarre little house, a pristine patch of sand, and an ancient martial arts master who had moved a boulder with a gentle push. He was tired, sore, and more confused than he had ever been in his life. But for the first time in 2 weeks, the crushing weight of his dream felt a little bit lighter. He wasn't just chasing All Might's shadow anymore. He was about to step onto a new path entirely, the path of the Turtle School. The promise of sunrise was a pale, pearlescent whisper on the horizon when Izuku arrived. The air was cool and carried the clean, sharp scent of low tide. He had slept deeply, a dreamless, exhausted slumber, but had forced himself awake hours before dawn, terrified of being late. He stood at the edge of the pristine sand surrounding Kame House, his posture straight, his heart a nervous drum against his ribs. He was ready. He thought. He expected a solemn ceremony, perhaps a formal induction into the Turtle School. Maybe Roshi would teach him the secret breathing techniques, the foundational stances, the first kata that would unlock the path to impossible strength. He had spent the night imagining it, his mind alight with the possibilities. The door to Kame House creaked open, and Master Roshi emerged, yawning wide enough to unhinge his jaw. He was wearing a simple white tank top and baggy pants, his turtle shell conspicuously absent. He didn't acknowledge Izuku at first. Instead, he faced the rising sun and began a series of what could only be described as bizarre, flowing stretches. He moved with the languid grace of a sea anemone, his old limbs bending and swaying in ways that seemed to defy anatomy. It looked profoundly silly and, Izuku had to admit, incredibly difficult. After a few minutes of his strange dance, Roshi finally turned his attention to his new student. He looked Izuku up and down, his gaze analytical behind his sunglasses. "You're on time. That's a start," he grunted, grabbing a towel to wipe the sweat from his bald head. "Punctuality is the first step on the path of a martial artist. It shows respect. For me, for yourself, and for the training." Izuku puffed out his chest slightly. "Yes, Master Roshi. I'm ready to learn." "Good. Good," Roshi said, nodding. "Because your first lesson is about to begin." He gestured with a thumb back towards the colossal mess that was the rest of the beach. "You see that section over there? The one with all the rusted engine blocks and mangled car chassis?" Izuku followed his gaze to a particularly daunting quadrant of his own grid plan. It was a metal jungle, a tetanus-laced nightmare of heavy industry's ghosts. "Yes, sir. For years, I've been pulling the choice bits of scrap from this mess. Good steel, aluminum, a bit of copper," Roshi explained, walking towards the edge of his clean oasis. "I have a contact at a specialized recycling center. A little place on the far side of the Muzutafu Industrial District. They pay top yen for pre-sorted, high-density scrap. I've got a pile ready for a delivery." He pointed to a neatly stacked cube of metal near the trash line. It was horrifying. At its base was an entire engine block from a truck. Stacked on top were bent I-beams, tangled nests of rebar, and the solid steel axle of what might have been a bus. The entire thing was bound together with thick, rusted chains, and a crude harness made of old seatbelts was attached to it. It had to weigh several hundred kilograms. "So, you want me to help you load it onto a truck?" Izuku asked, his voice wavering slightly. Roshi let out a short, sharp laugh. "A truck? Boy, do I look like I'm made of money? Trucks cost fuel. They get stuck in traffic. No. You're going to deliver it." Izuku stared at him. Then at the metal monstrosity. Then back at Roshi. "Deliver it? How?" "On your back, of course," Roshi said, as if it were the most obvious thing in the world. "It's a 7-mile walk. Uphill for the first 2. There's a map I drew for you on that piece of driftwood. Don't be late for the drop-off. Mr. Tsuruta is a stickler for schedules. Once you're done, you run back here." The bottom fell out of Izuku's stomach. This wasn't training. This was manual labor. Brutal, bone-breaking, impossible manual labor. It was All Might's plan all over again, but with a longer commute. "But, Master," he stammered, desperation creeping into his voice. "What does this have to do with martial arts? With the Turtle School?" I thought you were going to teach me technique. Roshi's demeanor, which had been light and casual, hardened in an instant. He took a step closer, his presence suddenly immense. You think martial arts is about fancy poses and breaking boards? You think it begins with a punch? You are a fool. His voice was low and intense. Martial arts begins here, he said, poking a hard, bony finger into Izuku's chest. In the spirit. And it is built here. He stomped a bare foot on the sand. In the foundation. Your body is a house built of twigs, and you're asking me to teach you how to install lightning rods. Before you can learn to fight, you must first learn to endure. Before you can learn to move, you must learn to carry. This is not just a delivery, boy. This is your first lesson. Now, are you a student of the turtle school or not? The question hung in the air, heavy and final. Izuku looked at the impossible task, at the disappointment welling up inside him, and then into the dark lenses of his master's sunglasses. He saw his own reflection, a small, wavering figure. He had made a promise. He had chosen this path. He swallowed his pride and his disappointment. I am master, good. The sun is rising. You're burning daylight. The first day was a portrait of misery. Getting the scrap pile onto his back was an ordeal in itself. It took him 15 minutes of grunting, straining, and failed attempts before he managed to heave it up, the weight settling onto his shoulders with a force that nearly drove him to his knees. His legs trembled like saplings in a hurricane. The walk was worse. The 7 miles felt like 70. The initial 2-mile uphill climb on a cracked, uneven road was a gauntlet of fire. His lungs burned, his vision swam, and the chains dug into his shoulders, raw and unforgiving. Cars whizzed past, their drivers giving him strange looks. He became a bizarre, trudging spectacle, a sweaty, grimacing teenager carrying a mountain of junk through a modern city. He wanted to quit 1,000 times. He wanted to drop the scrap and run, back to the familiar, if daunting, simplicity of All Might's plan. But Roshi's words echoed in his head. Before you can learn to fight, you must first learn to endure. He made it to the recycling center, a grimy facility that smelled of ozone and hot metal, with only minutes to spare. Mr. Tsuruta, a squat man with a perpetually unimpressed expression, grunted, weighed the scrap, and handed Izuku a slip of paper. The run back was agonizing, his legs feeling like lead, but a strange sense of accomplishment pushed him forward. He had done it. When he finally stumbled back onto Dagoba Beach, muscles screaming, body slick with sweat, Roshi was sitting in his lawn chair, sipping another glass of iced tea. You're slow, was all he said. Be faster tomorrow, and so it began. The first month was a blur of this singular, torturous routine. Wake at dawn. Deliver the scrap. Run back. Collapse. Every day, Roshi had a new, monstrously heavy and awkwardly shaped pile of metal waiting for him. One day it was a bundle of solid steel pipes that rolled and shifted with every step. The next, it was the entire twisted frame of a compact car, which caught the wind like a sail. But slowly, imperceptibly at first, something began to change. Izuku started to learn. He learned that if he tightened his core, the weight on his back felt more stable. He learned to breathe in a deep, steady rhythm that synced with his steps, a rhythmic shurha that conserved oxygen. He learned how to plant his feet to absorb the shock of the road, to use the momentum of a downhill slope to carry him through the next flat section. He was, without realizing it, internalizing the principles of balance, rhythm, and energy conservation on a profound, cellular level. He stopped thinking of it as a walk. It became a moving meditation. His mind, usually a chaotic storm of analysis and anxiety, had to focus entirely on the physical task. He started noticing things, the subtle shift in the wind, the slight incline of the pavement, the sound of his own footfalls. His senses were sharpening. By the end of the first month, he could make the delivery run in under 2 hours and run back in 45 minutes. He was still exhausted at the end of each day, but it was a clean, satisfying exhaustion, not the soul-crushing despair of his first 2 weeks on the beach. He hadn't thrown a single punch, but he felt stronger, more solid, than ever before. One morning, at the start of the second month, he arrived to find no pile of scrap waiting for him. Instead, Roshi stood with his arms crossed, pointing to the vast, untouched expanses of sand. "The deliveries have strengthened your back and legs," Roshi announced. "But your arms are like wet noodles, and your hands are soft. A martial artist's hands are his primary tools. They must be strong, yes, but also resilient. Today, your training changes. You are going to plow this beach." Izuku blinked. "Plow it? With a machine?" Roshi laughed. "With these," he said, holding up his own gnarled, heavily calloused hands. "There's valuable scrap buried under all this surface junk. Copper wiring, brass fittings, lead weights. Good dense metals. The only way to find them is to go deep. You will till the sand, section by section, with your bare hands. Find the good stuff, pile it over there. Discard the rest." Izuku looked down at his own hands. They were boyish, scarred only by minor scrapes. The thought of digging through sand mixed with broken glass, rusty nails, and who knows what else was deeply unnerving, but he didn't question it this time. He just nodded. The first few hours were excruciating. The sand was coarse and abrasive, scraping his palms raw. He had to dig deep, using his fingers like claws to sift through the filth. It was monotonous, back-breaking work. His shoulders and forearms quickly began to burn with a deep, unfamiliar fire. By noon, his hands were red and blistered, his fingernails chipped and broken. "Your technique is all wrong!" Roshi barked, suddenly appearing beside him. "You're trying to pull with your arms. You'll be useless by nightfall. The power doesn't come from your shoulders, boy. It comes from the earth. Plant your feet, use your hips, turn your core. Make your whole body a single machine for digging," Roshi demonstrated, sinking into a low horse stance. He plunged his hands into the sand, and with a powerful, twisting motion that originated from his legs and hips, he displaced a huge amount of sand with minimal effort. It wasn't arm strength. It was a wave of force, channeled through his body. Izuku watched, fascinated, and tried to copy the motion. It felt awkward at first, a clumsy imitation. But he kept at it. He focused on the feeling of his feet gripping the ground, the twist of his waist, the way the power flowed up his spine and out through his arms. Slowly, his movements became more efficient, less painful. He found a rhythm, a steady, powerful churn that allowed him to work for hours. Days turned into weeks. His hands, which had blistered and bled, began to heal. The skin grew thick and tough, calluses forming over his palms and fingers until they felt like leather. His grip strength became phenomenal. He could shatter a piece of driftwood in his fist without thinking. His forearms and shoulders became corded with dense, powerful muscle, and he found scrap. Coils of green-sheathed copper wire, heavy brass faucets, even small ingots of lead. Each discovery was a small victory, a tangible reward for his labor. He wasn't just digging, he was treasure hunting. He was reclaiming this beach, not just on the surface, but from within. He was making it clean. Halfway through the third month, a new task was added. "The Kame house needs an expansion," Roshi declared one afternoon, gesturing to a pile of lumber and a small box of old, well-worn tools. "I need a new deck for sunbathing and a storeroom for my research materials." He winked, and Izuku had a sinking feeling he knew what kind of research came in glossy magazines. "You will build it," Roshi instructed. Using only these, the tools were all manual. A heavy handsaw, a hammer with a worn wooden handle, a hand-crank drill, a measuring tape, and a level. "But I don't know anything about construction," Izuku protested. "Then you'll learn," Roshi said simply. "Work hard, study well. The principles are the same." This training was a different beast entirely. It wasn't about endurance or raw power. It was about precision. His first attempts at sawing a straight line were laughable. The cut would veer off, jagged and ugly. Hammering was a similar challenge. If he hit the nail with too much unfocused force, the wood would split. If he didn't hit it hard enough, the nail would bend. Roshi was a harsh but effective critic. "You're fighting the saw. Guide it, don't force it. Let the tool do the work," he'd shout. "Feel the grain of the wood. Each swing of the hammer should be a single, focused point of impact. No wasted motion." Izuku began to understand. This was control. This was focus. He learned to measure twice and cut once. He learned the satisfying thwack of a perfectly driven nail. He learned how to fit two pieces of wood together into a strong, stable joint. He was applying his strength with surgical precision. It was one thing to be strong enough to lift a car engine. It was another thing entirely to be strong enough to drive a nail without splitting the board. He built the deck board by board. It was slow, meticulous work. But as the structure took shape under his own two hands, a new kind of pride bloomed in his chest. This was different from the pride of a successful delivery run or a pile of found copper. This was creation. He was building something lasting and useful. His confidence, once a fragile thing based on the borrowed dream of one for all, was now being forged in the crucible of his own tangible accomplishments. One sweltering afternoon in the 4th month, All Might paid a visit. He arrived in his skeletal form, carrying a cooler of drinks for his protégé. He found Izuku on his hands and knees, meticulously sanding the edge of a deck board with a piece of rough sandstone. "Young Midoriya!" he called out, his voice thin but warm. Izuku looked up, breaking into a wide smile. "All Might! It's good to see you!" All Might's eyes swept over his student, and his jaw went slack. The change was staggering. For months ago, Izuku was a scrawny, if determined kid. Now, he was something else. He wasn't huge or overly muscular like a bodybuilder. He was lean, wiry, and carved from stone. Every muscle was defined and functional, from the cords in his neck to the dense muscles of his forearms and the solid platform of his back. His posture was perfect, his movements economical and fluid even as he stood up. He carried himself with a quiet, solid confidence that he had never possessed before. "My boy!" All Might breathed, his eyes wide with shock. The plan, it's working even better than I'd imagined. Your physique it's perfect." Izuku just smiled. "It's not your plan, All Might. It's Master Roshi's." From the newly built deck, Roshi gave a lazy wave. "Afternoon, Bony Might. Glad you approve. We're building from the ground up." All Might looked from the deck to the vast, nearly clean expanse of the beach, to his successor. "But I don't understand. This is just labor. How has this produced such specific results?" "Because it's not just labor," Roshi corrected him gently. "It's holistic training. Carrying the scrap taught him endurance and balance. Tilling the sand built his core and conditioned his hands. Building the deck taught him precision and control. We haven't been training his muscles. We've been training his body. The muscles are just a happy side effect." All Might looked humbled. He had approached Izuku's training like a math problem, at X amount of weightlifting and Y amount of cardio to equal Z result. Roshi had approached it like an art form. Before he left, All Might watched as Roshi initiated the final training exercise of the day. "All right, Izuku! Into the water! Time to dodge the sharks!" Izuku grinned, stripped off his shirt, and waded into the murky ocean water until it was up to his chest. Roshi stood on the shore, and next to him was a bucket filled with smooth, heavy stones. "What in the—" All Might began. "Awareness training," Roshi said, picking up a stone. "A hero needs to be able to sense danger from all directions. The water provides resistance and deadens the senses. An ideal classroom." Without another word, he whipped his arm. A stone shot through the air, a gray blur aimed right at Izuku's head. With a speed that seemed impossible, Izuku dropped, the stone zipping through the space where his head had been a split second before and splashing into the water behind him. Whiz! Splash! Another stone. Izuku twisted to his left, letting it fly past his shoulder. Whiz! Whump! A third stone, thrown with a deceptive underhand curve, caught him squarely in the ribs. Izuku grunted but quickly regained his footing, a determined look on his face. All Might was horrified. "You're throwing rocks at him. They're harmless motivation," Roshi said with a grin. "He relies too much on his eyes. I'm teaching him to listen. To feel the air move, to sense the displacement in the water, to react with his whole body, not just his brain." All Might watched, mesmerized, as the strange dance continued. Izuku was hit more often than not, but he was getting better. He was starting to move before the stone was even halfway to him, reacting to the subtle cues of Roshi's posture, the sound of the wind. This wasn't just training. This was the forging of instinct. As the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery oranges and purples, the training finally ended. The beach was almost unrecognizable. The mountains of trash were gone, replaced by neat piles of sorted materials and a vast, clean shoreline. The pink house with its new deck looked like a proper home. Izuku sat on the edge of the deck, his body humming with a pleasant exhaustion. Roshi sat beside him, handing him a tall, cold glass of water. They sat in comfortable silence for a long moment, watching the waves roll in. "You have done well, Izuku," Roshi said, his voice quiet and sincere. It was the first time he had offered such direct praise, and it landed in Izuku's chest with more weight than any pile of scrap metal. "You have worked hard. You have studied well. You have eaten and slept plenty." He looked over at his student. The boy's physique was ready. His muscles were dense, his tendons strong, his body a single, coordinated unit. But more importantly, his spirit had been tempered. The frantic desperation was gone, replaced by a calm, steady determination. His confidence was no longer a hope for the future. It was a fact, earned through sweat and calluses. "The vessel is built," Roshi said, a strange, knowing smile on his face. "The foundation is set and the walls are strong. Your body is ready." He stood up and stretched, his old joints popping. "But the body is only half of a true martial artist." He looked down at Izuku, and for a moment, Izuku could have sworn he saw a powerful, ancient light glowing behind the dark lenses of his sunglasses. "You've trained your body. Tomorrow," Roshi declared, his voice filled with a new, profound gravity that sent a shiver down Izuku's spine. "We begin training your spirit. Tomorrow, I will teach you about ki." The next morning, the world felt different. The air itself seemed to hum with a quiet anticipation. The physical agony that had been Izuku's constant companion for 4 months was gone, replaced by a deep, thrumming readiness in his muscles. He had built the house, as Roshi had put it. Now, he was about to learn what secrets it was meant to hold. He didn't find his master on the beach, or the newly built deck. The door to Kame House was slightly ajar, a silent invitation. Izuku had never been inside before. It had been Roshi's private sanctuary, and Izuku, ever polite, had never dreamed of intruding. Now, with a hesitant hand, he pushed the door open and stepped across the threshold. The interior was a stunning paradox of order and chaos. The main room was circular, the walls lined with towering bookshelves crammed with everything from ancient, leather-bound martial arts treatises to stacks of what looked suspiciously like girly magazines tucked behind a potted fern. The air smelled of sea salt, old paper, turtle wax, and freshly brewed jasmine tea. A simple wooden table and 2 chairs sat in the center of the room. A small, functional kitchen was off to one side, immaculately clean. The entire space felt intensely personal, a living museum of a very, very long life. It was cluttered but not messy, eccentric but strangely peaceful. Master Roshi sat cross-legged on a cushion at the central table, a steaming cup of tea cradled in his hands. He wore a simple orange gi, his turtle shell leaning against the wall like a piece of treasured furniture. He gestured to the cushion opposite him. "Sit, Izuku. Drink," he said, his voice calm and welcoming. Izuku sat, his posture stiff and formal. He took the cup Roshi offered. The warmth seeped into his calloused hands, and the fragrant steam filled his senses. For a moment, they just sat in silence, listening to the gentle hiss of the kettle and the distant cry of gulls. "For 4 months," Roshi began, his voice taking on the same gravitas it had the previous evening, "we have focused on the external. We have tempered your flesh, hardened your bone, and strengthened your muscle. We have built a proper vessel." He took a slow sip of his tea. "But a vessel is useless if it is empty, or worse, if the power you pour into it leaks out through 1,000 cracks." Izuku leaned forward, his every fiber buzzing with concentration. "Cracks? You mean weaknesses?" "No," Roshi said, setting his cup down with a soft click. "I mean a lack of control. Not physical control, you have that now. You can build a deck and dodge a stone. I mean internal control, the control of your life force. Your spirit energy." He looked Izuku directly in the eye, his gaze piercing even through the dark sunglasses. I am going to teach you about ki. Izuku's pen and notebook were out on the table before he even consciously realized he'd grabbed them from his backpack. This was it. The secret to the boulder. The hidden power. Ki. Izuku repeated, the word feeling foreign and mythic on his tongue. He scribbled it at the top of a fresh page. Ki. Possible energy source? Non-quirk related. Origin? He looked up, his eyes wide. Is it a kind of bioenergy? Like an advanced form of ATP utilization? Or maybe a specific application of the body's electrical field, harnessed and projected? Some people with electricity-based quirks can manipulate their own bioelectricity. But you said it wasn't a quirk. Roshi listened patiently to Izuku's rapid-fire theorizing, a small smile playing on his lips. When the boy finally paused for breath, the old master chuckled. Your mind is a busy little workshop, isn't it? Always trying to measure and label everything. That mind is your greatest strength, boy. And right now, it is your greatest obstacle. He held up a hand to forestall another barrage of questions. Put the notebook away. You cannot understand the ocean by analyzing a single drop of water. You must feel the tide. Izuku, blushing slightly, reluctantly capped his pen and put the notebook aside. Ki is not something you can measure in. What did you call them? Gels? Roshi said the word as if it were an exotic and slightly silly fruit. It is not electricity. It is not heat. It is life, the fighting spirit in your gut when you face that boulder. The warmth of the sun on your skin. The quiet strength of the palm tree outside. The energy of a storm. All living things have it. It is the spark that separates the living from the inanimate. Most beings live their entire lives without ever knowing how to sense it, let alone control it. Izuku's mind was reeling, trying to fit this concept into a scientific framework. Life energy? A metaphysical concept? Is this related to spirituality? Is he talking about a soul? But there's no empirical evidence for such things. It defies known biological and physical laws, unless it's a law we haven't discovered yet. A new fundamental force? Seeing the boy's internal struggle, Roshi decided a demonstration was in order. Words are wind, Izuku. Let me show you. He held out his hand, palm up, just above the surface of the table. He closed his eyes, and his breathing deepened, falling into the same powerful, rhythmic cadence Izuku had learned to use on his delivery runs. The air in the small room grew still and heavy. The faint hum Izuku had felt earlier intensified, and it seemed to be emanating from the old man himself. Then, Izuku saw it. A faint, pale blue light began to gather in the center of Rashi's palm. It started as a tiny pinprick, a barely there shimmer, like heat haze. But it grew steadily, coalescing, swirling like a miniature galaxy. It brightened, solidifying into a small, stable sphere of soft, pulsating light. It was the most beautiful and impossible thing Izuku had ever seen. The orb of light, no bigger than a golf ball, hovered silently. It didn't radiate heat, yet it felt intensely warm and alive. It cast gentle blue shadows on the walls of the room. There was a soft, almost inaudible hum coming from it, a sound that Izuku felt more in his bones than heard with his ears. It felt peaceful, powerful, real. Izuku stared, his mouth agape, his scientific rationalizations crumbling into dust. Bioluminescence? No, the light was too controlled, too bright, and generated from nothing. Static electricity? Impossible to contain in a stable sphere like that in open air. A projection-type quirk? Roshi had been adamant it wasn't a quirk, and more than that, it felt different. Quirks, even the most subtle ones, had a sense of performance. They were an external power being used. This felt internal. It felt as natural as Rashi's own breathing. Roshi opened his eyes and smiled at Izuku's dumbfounded expression. This, he said softly, is ki. A small piece of my own life energy, given form. With a gentle breath, he closed his hand, and the light vanished as silently as it had appeared, leaving no trace. The room returned to normal, but for Izuku, the world had been fundamentally altered. He had just witnessed a miracle, a polite refutation of everything he thought he knew about the universe. How? Izuku whispered, his voice full of awe. With practice. Roshi said simply. And now it's your turn to learn. The first step is not to create but to feel. You must learn to find the spark within yourself, and so, the next phase of his training began. It was, in its own way, more grueling and frustrating than any physical labor he had ever endured. Roshi's first instruction was meditation. He had Izuku sit on his cushion, cross-legged, back straight. Close your eyes, Roshi instructed. Clear your mind. Focus on your breath. In and out. Feel the air fill your lungs. Feel it leave your body. That is all you must do. It sounded simple. It was maddeningly difficult. The moment Izuku closed his eyes, his mind, that busy little workshop, went into overdrive. Okay, clear my mind. Am I doing it right? I'm thinking about clearing my mind, which means my mind isn't clear. Okay, stop thinking about that. Think about breathing. In, out. I wonder what All Might is doing right now. Is he watching the news? He said he'd be checking in. I hope he's proud of me. My nose itches. I shouldn't scratch it. A true martial artist would have the discipline to ignore an itchy nose. But it's really itchy. Is Roshi watching me? I bet he can tell I'm not doing it right. What if I can't do this? What if my ki is too weak because I was quirkless? Does having a quirk give you more ki? Or is it separate? I need to ask him. Okay, focus. Breathing. In, out. After what felt like an eternity, Roshi's voice cut through his mental chaos. You're trying too hard. Stop trying to be calm and just be. Your thoughts are a river. Do not try to dam it. Let it flow past. You are not the river, you are the stone at its bottom. Let the thoughts wash over you and be still. They tried for hours. Days. The frustration mounted. Izuku could carry a car frame for 7 miles, but he couldn't sit still for 10 minutes without his brain rebelling. He grew agitated. His muscles, so accustomed to constant work, ached with the unfamiliar strain of stillness. This is useless! He burst out one afternoon, his voice tight with frustration. I'm just sitting here. I'm not learning anything. Roshi, who had been dozing in his chair, opened one eye. Patience, boy. You spent 14 years letting your mind run wild. You cannot tame it in a single day. The strongest tree grows the slowest. He changed tactics. He took Izuku to the shoreline at sunset. Forget the mind for now, he said. Focus on the body. You learned to breathe to carry a refrigerator. Now you will learn to breathe to feel your soul. He had Izuku stand at the water's edge, feet planted firmly in the wet sand. Breathe with the ocean, Roshi instructed. Inhale as the wave comes in. Exhale as it goes out. Do not command your breath, sync it with the world around you. Become part of its rhythm. This was better. The physical anchor of the waves gave Izuku's restless mind something to hold on to. He breathed in, feeling the cool, salty air fill him as a wave rushed up the shore to lick at his ankles. He breathed out, feeling the tension leave his shoulders as the water receded with a soft hiss. In and out. Rush, and recede. He did this every sunrise and every sunset. It was a slow, painstaking process. He started to feel a connection, a sense of being part of the vast, breathing ecosystem around him. He was no longer just a boy on a beach. He was a small part of the beach itself. Weeks passed. The 5th month of his training was nearly over. He still hadn't felt a single flicker of ki. The doubt was a cold, creeping thing in his heart. Maybe he couldn't do it. Maybe he just didn't have it. One morning, Roshi seemed to sense his despair. He led Izuku to the side of Kame House, where a large, rusty anvil sat half buried in the sand. It was one of the few heavy items Izuku hadn't been able to haul to the recycling center. It had to weigh at least 150 kilograms. Your final test for this stage, Roshi announced. Lift it. Izuku's heart sank. A test he was sure to fail. But he wouldn't disobey. He bent his knees, getting a low grip, his calloused hands finding purchase on the cold iron. He remembered his training, feet planted, core tight, used the legs. He took a deep breath and heaved. The anvil moved. It lifted a few inches off the ground, a testament to the raw power he had built in his body. But the strain was immense. His muscles screamed, his back arched under the oppressive weight, and his face was a mask of effort. He held it for a few seconds before having to drop it with a heavy thud. He stood up, panting, a bead of sweat tracing a path through the grime on his temple. I can do it, he gasped. But it's heavy. Yes, it is, Roshi agreed. You lifted it with muscle. You lifted it with your body. You forced it. No, he said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I want you to try again, but this time, do not try to lift it. Izuku looked at him, confused. What? Do not use your muscles. They are a tool, but a crude one for this task. I want you to close your eyes. Breathe. Find that place of calm you feel by the ocean. Find the rhythm, and then, ask the anvil to be lighter. This was insane. Absolutely, certifiably insane. Asking an anvil to be lighter? But Izuku was out of options. His own way wasn't working. He closed his eyes. He ignored the ridiculousness of the situation. He focused on his breathing. In with the sea breeze, out with the sound of the waves. He let the river of his thoughts flow past him. This is stupid. This will never work. I'm going to throw my back out. He let them go. He became the stone at the bottom of the river. He reached down and placed his hands on the anvil. He didn't try to grip it. He just rested them there. He didn't think about lifting. He didn't think about the weight. He focused on the stillness within him, that tiny seed of peace he had cultivated over the past month, and then, he reached for something else. Not with his hands, but with his will. He tried to feel that spark Roshi had talked about. That life energy. He imagined it, a small, warm light in the center of his chest. He focused on it, nurtured it, and then, following Roshi's bizarre instruction, he tried to guide it. He imagined that warm energy flowing out of his chest, down his arms, and into his hands. He imagined it seeping into the cold iron of the anvil, not to push it, but to join with it. And then he felt it. It wasn't a flicker. It was a slow, gentle, unmistakable current. A warmth that had nothing to do with temperature bloomed in his palms. It felt like coming home. It was his own energy, his own life force, and he was feeling it for the very first time. It was faint, a mere trickle, but it was there. A gasp escaped his lips. His eyes shot open. You feel it, Roshi said. It wasn't a question. I do, Izuku whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of shock and elation. Good. Now guide it. Don't push. Just guide. Izuku closed his eyes again, focusing on the wondrous new sensation. He took a breath, and as he stood, he didn't pull with his arms or push with his legs. He simply guided that warm current, that trickle of ki, to do the work. The anvil lifted. It rose from the sand as smoothly and silently as the sun rising over the horizon. There was no grunt of effort, no straining muscles. One moment it was on the ground, the next it was hovering in his grip, feeling not weightless, but cooperative. It felt like it weighed no more than a bag of groceries. Izuku held it there, his mind a silent explosion of pure, unadulterated joy and wonder. This was it. This was the secret. It wasn't about overpowering the world. It was about being in harmony with it, and with himself. He gently lowered the anvil back to the ground. He opened his hands and stared at them as if they belonged to someone else. They were the same calloused, scarred hands, but now he knew they were capable of so much more. He looked up at his master, tears welling in his eyes. Master! I did it! Roshi's face was split by a wide, proud grin. He reached out and placed a heavy hand on Izuku's shoulder. Yes, you did, my boy. You have taken your first step into a much larger world. Later that day, as they sat on the deck watching the sun dip below the waves, Roshi finally connected all the pieces for him. You understand now, don't you? Roshi said, his tone serious once more. What you just did, that is the essence of control. It is the foundation upon which all advanced techniques are built. He looked Izuku in the eye. Now I can tell you the true purpose of this training. The real reason I took you on as a student. He leaned forward. The power your other master, All Might, plans to give you. One for all. I have heard him speak of it. It is a power stockpiled by many generations. A raging, boundless ocean of energy. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Your body, as it was a teacup trying to hold that ocean. It would have been shattered into a million pieces. The physical training we did? That was to turn the teacup into a great reservoir, strong, solid, and deep. He then held up his hand, fingers spread. But even the strongest reservoir is useless if it has cracks. If the power can't be contained and directed, it will still burst forth uncontrollably, destroying the vessel and everything around it. Your first attempt at lifting the anvil was with muscle, brute force. You could barely manage it, and it hurt you. That is how you would have used One for All. A single, desperate act of power that would have crippled you. Izuku's blood ran cold. He remembered All Might's warning about his limbs blowing off. It hadn't been an exaggeration. This, Roshi continued, his voice resonating with wisdom. This key, this is the sealant for the cracks. It is the network of pipes and sluice gates within the reservoir. Key control is how you will learn to open the floodgates just a little, to channel a small, precise stream of that immense power wherever you need it to go. You won't be a tidal wave, destroying everything in your path. You will be the master of the dam, releasing exactly as much power as you need, no more, no less. The scale of what Roshi had done for him finally crashed down on Izuku. This wasn't supplemental training. This wasn't just about discipline. This was the key. Master Roshi hadn't just prepared his body for One for All. He had prepared his very spirit. He had given him the one tool All Might, for all his power and wisdom, never could have, the means to master the beast before it was even uncaged. He bowed his head, overcome with a gratitude so profound it left him speechless. Thank you, Master, he finally managed to say, his voice thick with emotion. Thank you? As dusk settled, a familiar, skeletal figure appeared at the edge of the beach. It was Toshinori Yagi, here for one of his regular check-ins. He saw the two of them on the deck and waved, a warm smile on his face. But as he drew closer, his smile faltered, replaced by a look of sheer astonishment. He was looking at Izuku, who, at Roshi's instruction, was performing his final exercise of the day. Izuku was standing on one foot atop a tall, thin pole that had been driven into the sand. It was no thicker than his wrist. He wasn't wobbling. He wasn't tense. His eyes were closed, his breathing was even, and a look of absolute, profound serenity was on his face. He was perfectly, impossibly balanced. Toshinori stopped, rooted to the spot. He had seen the physical transformation in his successor, the lean muscle, the hardened hands. But this was something else entirely. It was in the boy's posture, in the very air around him. The frantic, anxious energy that had always clung to Izuku Midoriya was gone. In its place was a deep, unshakable calm. A centeredness. His presence, his very essence, felt different. It was denser, more solid. It was the presence of someone who was completely and utterly in command of himself. Master Roshi, sitting in his lawn chair, saw the look on Toshinori's face and chuckled. Impressive, isn't it? He called out. The reservoir is built. The pipes are laid. He's ready for the storm. Toshinori stared at his successor, balanced between the darkening earth and the stardusted sky, and felt a shiver run down his spine. He had come here to check on the progress of a student. He had found something far more. He had found a true martial artist, ready to inherit a legend. And he knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his bones, that the future of One for All was about to be changed forever. The sun rose over the Muzutafu coastline, casting long, dramatic shadows across the sand. For 10 long months, this particular stretch of shore, Dagoba Municipal Beach Park, had been a monument to societal neglect, a festering wound of rust and refuse. Today, it was a testament to the indomitable will of one young man. The sand was pristine, raked into gentle, wave-like patterns that mirrored the calm ocean lapping at the shore. Every last scrap of metal, every shattered appliance, every broken bottle, and forgotten piece of furniture had been removed. The colossal mountains of trash that had once choked the horizon were gone, replaced by neatly organized, towering ziggurats of scrap metal, sorted by type and size, stacked against the seawall with an almost artistic precision. The air, once thick with the stench of decay and briny rot, was now clean, carrying only the crisp, salty scent of the sea. In the center of this reclaimed paradise stood Izuku Midoriya. He was no longer the hunched, nervously twitching boy who had first stumbled onto this beach. The 10 months of hellish, relentless training under the dual, and often contradictory, tutelage of All Might and Master Roshi had forged him into something new. The baby fat had long since been rendered away, replaced by a physique that was not bulky, but lean and dense, like a swimmer or a gymnast. Every muscle was a cord of tightly wound potential, visible beneath his sun-bronzed skin. His green-black hair was a little longer, ruffled by the sea breeze. His posture, once a physical apology for his own existence, was now straight and rooted to the earth. He was performing a kata, a slow, deliberate sequence of movements that was the cornerstone of Master Roshi's turtle school. His feet slid across the sand with practiced grace, his hands carving arcs through the air. Each motion was linked by a steady, powerful rhythm of breath. Inhale, a gathering of force. Exhale, a projection of intent. This was not exercise, it was a moving meditation. He could feel the energy within him, the life force he had come to know as ki, circulating through his body like a warm, familiar current. It was a small, personal power, but it was his. He had cultivated it, nurtured it, and learned to command its every ebb and flow. It hummed in his core, a quiet song of self-mastery. He finished the kata, his final stance held with perfect stillness, his gaze fixed on the rising sun. A sense of profound, bone-deep peace settled over him. He had done it. He had moved mountains, one piece of trash at a time. The physical labor, orchestrated by All Might's American Dream Plan, had built his body. The esoteric training from Master Roshi, focusing on meditation, energy control, and the martial arts, had built his mind and spirit. The two methodologies, one of overwhelming external force and the other of precise internal control, had seemed at odds, yet they had harmonized within him, creating a foundation stronger than he could have ever imagined. Young Midoriya, the voice boomed from the top of the stairs leading down to the beach, yet it lacked its usual thunder. Izuku turned. All Might, in his skeletal form, stood there, a look of utter astonishment on his gaunt face. He descended the stairs, his every step slow, his eyes sweeping across the immaculate beach. He looked from the perfectly stacked pyramids of junk to the boy standing in the center, and back again. I must admit, Toshinori Yagi said, his voice a low, raspy whisper of awe. I came here today expecting to see progress. I expected you to have cleared a significant portion. But this is complete. It's perfect. Izuku offered a small, respectful bow. I finished the last section before dawn, All Might. I wanted it to be ready. Toshinori walked closer, circling Izuku as a sculptor might examine a finished masterpiece. He noted the calluses on the boy's hands, the confident set of his shoulders, the calm clarity in his emerald eyes. This was not the same child he had offered his power to. The fanboy worship was still there, he could see it in the depths of those eyes, but it was now tempered by a quiet, solid self-assurance. This was a warrior. Your body is ready, Toshinori said, his voice thick with emotion. He placed a frail hand on Izuku's shoulder. More than ready. You have taken my ridiculous, almost cruel, regimen and you have surpassed my wildest expectations. You have turned this monument of neglect into a symbol of your dedication. You have a hero's heart, Izuku Midoriya, but now you have the body of one too. Izuku's eyes welled up, the familiar tears threatening to spill, but he blinked them back, his new discipline holding firm. Thank you, All Might. Thank you for giving me the chance. No, my boy, Toshinori said, a genuine, proud smile gracing his features. Thank you for seizing it. He paused, the light-hearted pride falling away, replaced by a grave solemnity. The air grew still, the only sound the gentle shushing of the waves. The moment had arrived. For 10 months, you have worked to build a worthy vessel, Toshinori said, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial hush. Now, it is time to pour the power into it. He reached up and plucked a single, golden strand of his hair. It caught the morning light, shimmering like a thread of spun sunlight. He held it out on the palm of his hand. It is time for you to inherit my quirk. It is time for you to receive one for all. Izuku stared at the single strand of hair. It seemed so small, so mundane, to be the carrier of such a legendary power. The power that saved millions, the power that created the symbol of peace. A legacy of 8 heroes, their strength, their will, their hope, all concentrated into this tiny filament. His throat went dry. So, how? Izuku asked, his voice barely a whisper. Tashinori's smile became a bit strained, a hint of awkwardness in his eyes. You have to ingest my DNA. So, well. He thrust his hand forward. Eat this. Izuku's mind, which had been contemplating the cosmic significance of generational power transfer, screeched to a halt. His perfectly calm demeanor evaporated, replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated bewilderment. To inherit the power, you have to take in a piece of me. Tashinori explained, waving the hair insistently. This is the quickest, most direct way. Come on now. There's no time. The UA entrance exam is this morning. All the profound gravity of the moment deflated like a punctured balloon. Izuku looked from the hair to All Might's earnest, expectant face. All the training, all the meditation, all the back-breaking labor, had led to this. He was going to eat his idol's hair. It was, he decided, perhaps the weirdest and most anticlimactic moment of his entire life. He sighed, a puff of resignation. Right. With a reverence that felt utterly absurd under the circumstances, he carefully took the strand of hair from Tashinori's palm. It was surprisingly coarse. He held it between his thumb and forefinger for a moment, took a deep breath, and placed it on his tongue. He swallowed. It went down with a tickle. For a second, nothing happened. Izuku stood there, feeling slightly foolish. He had just eaten a piece of hair. He waited. 1 second. 2. 3. And then it began. It wasn't a bang. It was a flood. From a distance, hidden behind one of the largest, most neatly stacked piles of refrigerators, Master Roshi watched through his sunglasses. He leaned on his gnarled wooden staff, a small, satisfied smile playing on his lips. He had watched the boy's progress every day, sometimes from afar, sometimes intervening with a cryptic lesson about breathing or a practical demonstration of how to lift a rusted-out sedan without throwing out one's back. He had seen the spirit within the boy, a spirit as bright and tenacious as that of his very first student, long ago. He saw Tashinori offer the hair. He saw the boy's comical reaction, and he chuckled softly. For all his godlike power, the boy is still just a boy. Awkward and full of strange notions. Then he saw Izuku swallow the hair. Roshi's smile faded, his posture straightening. His ancient eyes, hidden behind the dark lenses, focused with an intensity that belied his frail appearance. He could not see quirks, not in the way others could. But he could feel energy. He could feel life force. And what he felt now was like watching a single drop of water fall into a placid pond, only for the pond to erupt into a biblical typhoon. He felt a cataclysmic surge of power detonate within Izuku's frame. It was raw, untamed, titanic, a billion volts of lightning crammed into a light bulb. Roshi's grip tightened on his staff. This was the critical moment. This was where the body of a novice would typically tear itself apart, unable to contain such a deluge. This was the danger Tashinori, with his own natural resilience, had never truly understood. Come on, boy, Roshi thought, his focus absolute. Remember your training. Don't fight the storm. Don't try to dam the ocean. Guide it. Let it flow. Izuku's world dissolved into white-hot static. One for all was not a gentle stream. It was a supernova. A torrent of pure, unadulterated power slammed into his system with the force of a meteor strike. It was a chorus of a billion voices screaming a single word, smash. He felt the echoes of those who came before. He didn't see them as faces, but as presences, as feelings. A sense of grim determination from a man with scarred hands. A flash of playful, acrobatic light from a woman who felt like a shooting star. The unwavering, foundational strength of Nana Shimura, a warmth like a hearth fire. And behind them all, a searing, righteous fury, the origin point, a power born of defiance against an unspeakable evil. And finally, the eighth, All Might himself, a blazing sun of hope that dwarfed them all. Their combined will, their accumulated strength, crashed against the shores of his consciousness. It was too much. The power had nowhere to go. It surged toward his limbs, seeking release, promising only destruction. His cells screamed. His bones felt like they were about to be ground into dust. He felt a terrifying heat build in his right arm, a pressure that was going to blow it clean off his shoulder. This was it. The power was rejecting him. It was going to destroy him from the inside out. No, the thought was not his own, not entirely. It was the ingrained, instinctual response drilled into him over 10 months of relentless practice. It was the voice of his training, the muscle memory of his soul. When the river rages, you do not build a dam. You dig a canal. Master Roshi's words, spoken during a meditation session under a waterfall, echoed in the storm of his mind. Instinct took over. While one part of his brain was screaming in the face of oblivion, the other deeper part, the part that had spent hundreds of hours sitting still, breathing, and tracing the flow of his own ki, went to work. He didn't try to stop the flood. He accepted it. He opened the gates. For months, he had practiced visualizing his ki. He imagined it as a gentle, blue-green light flowing through his body along specific channels, or meridians. He had spent countless hours tracing these paths in his mind's eye, strengthening them, widening them, learning their every twist and turn. They were as familiar to him as the streets of his own neighborhood. Now, faced with the raging, incandescent starfire of One for All, his body did the only thing it knew how to do. It channeled the energy into those pathways. The sensation was terrifying and exhilarating. It was like diverting the Niagara Falls into a network of garden hoses. The pressure was immense. The pathways, accustomed to the gentle trickle of his personal ki, strained and groaned under the cosmic load. But they held. He felt One for All, a wild, chaotic ocean of power, being siphoned into the intricate, controlled river system of his ki channels. The incandescent, explosive energy was tamed, not by force, but by guidance. It surged up his spine, branched across his shoulders, flowed down his arms and legs, not as a destructive bomb, but as a contained, circulating current. The overwhelming pressure that had threatened to atomize him began to equalize. The billion screaming voices softened into a mighty, harmonious choir. The feeling of being torn apart was replaced by a feeling of being filled up, of becoming a vessel not of destruction, but of immense, boundless potential. The white light in his vision receded. He was back on the beach. He was on his hands and knees, panting, sweat pouring from his body, soaking his shirt and plastering his hair to his forehead. His entire body thrummed with a power so vast it felt like he was humming in tune with the universe itself. He was not broken. He was not bleeding. He was whole. He slowly pushed himself to his feet, his legs trembling not from weakness, but from the sheer, unadulterated energy coursing through them. He looked at his hands. They seemed the same, but he could feel it. A sleeping giant, a coiled dragon, a controlled star, resided within him now. All might was staring at him, his skeletal face a mask of shock, relief, and utter confusion. Young Midoriya, you glowed. Your skin was lit from within. For a moment I thought you were going to explode. Izuku took a deep, shuddering breath. The air he drew in seemed to supercharge the power, making it hum even louder. I almost did, he gasped, a weak smile touching his lips. It was a lot. A lot? All Might sputtered. My boy, when my master passed it to me, I blew out a window and broke 3 of her ribs just by flexing. You took the entire charge and you're just standing there. How are you feeling? Any pain? Anything broken? Anything feel out of place? Izuku took a moment to do a mental inventory. He flexed his fingers, rolled his shoulders, bent his knees. There was no pain. There was no strain. There was just power, an endless well of it, waiting to be drawn upon. No, Izuku said, his voice gaining strength. I'm okay. I feel incredible. I can feel it, All Might. It's like a giant, sleeping inside me. All Might's jaw hung open. He had prepared for a trip to the hospital. He had a cover story ready about a training accident. He had braced himself to see his successor in a cast, worrying about his chances at the exam. He had not prepared for this. He had not prepared for success. But how? Tashinori whispered, more to himself than to Izuku. To contain it so perfectly on the first try. It shouldn't be possible. He shook his head, forcing a determined look onto his face. No matter. We can analyze it later. The proof is in the pudding. It's time for your first test. You need to feel the power flow, even a little bit. Let's see you throw a punch. He gestured towards one of the few remaining pieces of large refuse he had specifically asked Izuku to leave for this purpose. A bulky, old, top-loading washing machine, its white enamel paint chipped and peeling, revealing patches of angry orange rust. Now the key, All Might began, slipping into lecture mode, is to channel the power through your body and into your fist. It will feel like an explosion. My master told me to clench my buttocks and scream smash, from the depths of my heart. That's how you let it loose. Don't hold back, my boy. Just let it rip. We'll worry about the broken bones after. He stepped back, a nervous, excited glint in his eye. He was expecting carnage. A shattered arm, a vaporized washing machine, a crater in the sand. That was the price of admission for wielding One for All. But Izuku didn't immediately wind up. He didn't scream. He didn't even look like he was preparing for an act of immense power. Instead, he walked calmly towards the washing machine, his bare feet sinking slightly into the cool sand. He stopped a few feet away, closed his eyes, and took a deep, centering breath. Don't use the ocean, he thought, recalling another of Roshi's lessons. Use a single cup of water from it. He dropped into a low, familiar stance. His feet were shoulder-width apart, knees bent, his center of gravity sinking low to the ground. It was the fundamental horse stance of the turtle school, the bedrock of every technique he had learned. It was a stance of stability, of rootedness. All Might watched, confused. What's with the strange pose, my boy? Just punch it. Izuku didn't answer. His focus was entirely internal. He could feel the vast, dormant ocean of One for All within him. It was tempting to unleash it, to let the tidal wave crash and feel its ultimate power. The whispers of the vestiges urged him to do so. Smash. He ignored them. Instead, he focused on his own, much smaller, much more familiar power. His ki. He pictured his ki as a network of fine, blue-green threads, woven throughout his body. Then, he visualized One for All as a blazing, golden sun in his solar plexus. He didn't try to grab the sun. Carefully, deliberately, he extended one of his key threads and just touched it. He drew off not a torrent, but a single, shimmering drop of golden energy. It was infinitesimally small compared to the whole, but even that tiny drop felt more potent than all of his own ki combined. He then used his ki control to envelop this drop of One for All, insulating it, containing it. It was like using a carefully woven basket to carry a live coal. The golden drop pulsed within its blue-green container, its immense power shielded and controlled. Slowly, he guided the contained energy. He moved it from his core, up his torso, across the back of his right shoulder, and down his arm. He didn't let it flood the limb. He directed it along a single, precise channel, like a laser beam down a fiber-optic cable. The energy concentrated, not into his whole fist, but into the single point of his two front knuckles. He could feel the hum of contained power, a pinpoint of stellar density, waiting to be released. His arm didn't even twitch. There was no visible buildup of light, no crackle of electricity. To an outside observer, he was just standing there. He opened his eyes. They were sharp, focused, and utterly calm. He exhaled, and he punched. There was no thunderclap. There was no shockwave that kicked up a cloud of sand. There was no blinding flash of light. The only sound was a soft, dull thump, like a book falling onto a carpeted floor. His fist connected with the rusted metal of the washing machine. For a split second, nothing seemed to happen. Then, All Might's eyes widened. The metal around Izuku's knuckles didn't bend, crumple, or tear. It simply vanished. Izuku pulled his fist back. The motion was smooth, effortless. His arm was fine. Not a single red mark, not a hint of a strain. His knuckles were unblemished. Left behind in the face of the washing machine was a hole. It was a perfect, fist-sized circle, its edges impossibly clean and smooth, as if bored out by a high-temperature industrial drill. There were no stress fractures around it, no warping of the surrounding metal. It was a hole of absolute, surgical precision. A faint wisp of ozone-scented smoke curled from the opening. The morning sun shone directly through the hole, projecting a perfect circle of light onto the sand behind the machine. Dust motes danced in the beam. Silence. The waves lapped at the shore. A distant gull cried out. All Might stood frozen, his mouth agape, his eyes toggling back and forth between Izuku's perfectly unharmed fist and the impossibly perfect hole in the washing machine. His mind, which had already been reeling, felt like it had been short-circuited. Every instinct, every piece of his own experience with One for All, had screamed that this was impossible. Power on that scale demanded a price. It was a force of nature, an explosion, a cataclysm. It shattered bones as easily as it shattered villains. Control was something that came later, after years of pain and struggle, and even then, it was more like aiming a hurricane than firing a bullet. What he had just witnessed was not a hurricane. It was a scalpel. My arm," he stammered, pointing a trembling finger at Izuku. "Your arm, it should have, the beach, there should be a crater. I don't understand." He looked utterly lost, as if the fundamental laws of his own reality had just been casually rewritten in front of him. Izuku looked down at his hand, then back at the hole, a slow smile of profound understanding spreading across his face. It had worked. The theories, the meditation, the endless hours of practice, it had all worked. He turned to his mentor, his expression calm and clear. "Master Roshi taught me how to control the flow of energy in my body," he explained, his voice steady. "He calls it ki. For months, I've been practicing how to gather it, move it, and focus it. I learned how to build and strengthen the pathways inside me for that energy to travel along." He gestured from himself to the washing machine. "I didn't try to unleash One for All. I couldn't. It's too big, too powerful. It felt like an ocean. If I tried to hold the whole ocean, I would have burst." He held up his fist, a new light of discovery in his eyes. "So I didn't. I just dipped a cup in, and poured that cup down a channel I had already built. One for All is just a much bigger river. But Master Roshi taught me how to build the riverbanks first, before the flood came." All Might stared, the pieces clicking into place in his mind with agonizing slowness. 10 months. He had focused on building the container, the physical body. He had seen the strange martial arts and meditation as a way for the boy to focus his mind, a quirky hobby of the old man he'd brought in. He had never considered that the container wasn't meant to be the boy's muscles and bones. The true container was the internal discipline. The control. He had been trying to build a fortress to withstand a siege. The old master had taught the boy how to open the gates and guide the invading army exactly where he wanted it to go. The sheer, paradigm-shifting brilliance of it left him speechless. All the pain he'd endured, all the broken bones and hospital visits in his youth, the long years it took him to even begin to regulate his output. Could it all have been avoided with a different kind of training? A foundation not of raw power, but of precise control? A soft, dry chuckle echoed from behind the pile of refrigerators. "See All Might?" A small, wiry old man in a loud Hawaiian shirt and sunglasses, leaning on a wooden staff, stepped out into the morning sun. Master Roshi ambled forward, his turtle shell on his back, a knowing, triumphant grin on his face. He stopped beside the washing machine and poked a finger through the perfect, silent hole. "It's not about the size of the wave," he said, his voice laced with the wisdom of centuries and the smug satisfaction of a teacher whose student had just aced the final exam in the most spectacular way imaginable. "It's about how you ride it.